One of these two Mafex Spider-Man figures is not real. Now, if you've collected Mafex in the past, then you probably already know which one that is. But for the sake of this video, and for those that don't, I'm gonna break each one of these down without saying which one is which, compare the differences between the two, and ultimately find out if it's worth purchasing bootleg Mafexes over authentic ones, because man, they can get quite expensive. But anyway, let's get into it. You may have noticed a couple things here. The first thing being that there are white cards scattered around the box, and that's because bootleg figures don't usually have the Marvel logo on the box in order to avoid copyright issues. So I went ahead and covered all the spots that a Marvel logo may be on both of these boxes. Secondly, you may have noticed that the boxes don't exactly look the same, and that's because they are two different Mafex Spider-Mans. The left side being Mafex 185 and the right side number 75. This is because the bootleg version doesn't actually come in the variant that I already had, but the only differences between the authentic ones is the paint job. So they should utilize the same or similar body mold. Now I want to go ahead and start with Mafex number 185. So let's go ahead and flip this figure around to the back side. And as you can see right off the bat, the box is fairly wobbly. Checking out the bottom, I noticed that the flap is getting pushed open by something on the inside, and that's forcing this box to sit just a little bit sideways. Not the best quality control on a box that I've seen, and it's definitely something to take note of for this figure. We have some beautifully clear graphics on the back side of Spider-Man in all sorts of swinging poses, and we also get a good look at the two head sculpts that we're going to be getting today, along with a sneak peek at the webbing. Now let's go ahead and pop this sucker open so we can get a look at the contents and a bit better look at what's included here. On the inside of the packaging, we have a verification slip. This just includes instructions on how to tell you if a figure is fake or not, and of course our good old-fashioned trusty rusty Mafex stand. Yeah, boy. We also got an external plastic pack that includes the webbing. This is going to be the biggest difference between the two boxes and why we see such a drastic change in sizes, if you know what I'm saying. Let's go ahead and snap him out of the plastic here, and now we can finally see everything that's included with the figure. There is a nice little set of accessories here, but we're going to go ahead and set all of these to the side. You know how we do things here. I want to get into the figure first. Let's start with the paint and sculpt. As you can see, we have a nice set of engraved lines all throughout the figure. They look to be super even, and despite my bias towards other methods of doing the webbing, such as 3D printed webbing or just painted webbing, I think it looks okay. That's something that I touched on a little bit more in the Amazing Yamaguchi Spider-Man video. I pretty much confessed that I'm not a fan of the engraved and painted lines because they run into a lot of QC issues on the paint side, and this figure is incredibly guilty of this in many areas, but it mostly seems like the head sculpts got the brunt of the bad paint issues. You see lots of missed lines in areas where there aren't even any lines at all. I mean, honestly, I think the paint job on the head sculpt alone is enough to fail the rest of the figure. And that's not the only spot that I have a problem with either. If we pan around the figure to the arm here, for instance, you can see some of the blue leaking into the red past this line. And then you can also see that the elbow joint is miscolored. This red doesn't match the rest of the figure, and it's really an entirely different shade. And the final paint issue that I'll point out today is that if we move to the chest, we see more red bleeding into the blue over this line. And like I said, this is all over the figure. The head sculpt just collectively got the worst of it. But there are also a few problems with the sculpt on the head though as well, such as the seam on his mask. It's just very blatantly out there. Now the second sculpt isn't as bad. In fact, the lines stay fairly consistent and the seam on the side of his mask isn't as noticeable. But there is this nasty big black splotch of paint on the side of his jaw that just kind of throws off the whole thing for me. I should also note that while I'm on the topic of the heads, they do interchange fairly easily. I didn't have a lot of resistance and interchanging them felt pretty normal. Moving on to the articulation, and I must say the articulation is awesome. The head is super flexible, quite possibly more flexible than all my other Mafexes, and I can bend it however I want. I also get the same satisfaction out of the chest and waist articulation points, and this leads to some very easily achievable poses. The arms and legs are also just as fine, and the double jointed functionality works amazingly. However, arguably the most important point of articulation for a Spider-Man figure, the butterfly joints are disastrous. In the words of Todd McFarlane,
when he put the costume on, he was a bug to me. I put him in these freakish positions. He was a rubbery guy.
Yeah, I can't touch his hands together behind his back. That's not entirely flexible. My Yamaguchi can. My Marvel Legends Final Swing Spider-Man can. And here I thought there were no pros to that figure. This is very disheartening, but regardless, the rest of the articulation carries, so it does still pass. Now we're going to move into some of the accessories. And let's start with the hands. I don't really care that much for hands, so I'm only going to give you a quick look at what we're getting with this figure. As you can see, we have a good set of variations to choose from, and they cover the ground of pretty much every area needed for a Spider-Man figure. The removal of the hands is exceptionally good. It doesn't feel like a chore and operates buttery smooth, so I couldn't ask for anything more there. there. Our webbing kit seems more complex than it is. We got one piece of webbing that's a sticking web that'll go to this peg, and that can attach to the end of the stand. We got 2 small wrist wrapping webs, 2 large wrist wrapping webs, and finally an L-shaped web for him to grasp onto. Finally included is an extra pair of feet that has magnets on it. Of course, these are going to pair to the hands that also have magnets. And we're gonna go ahead and pop these on and test if it's capable of holding the figure's weight or not. Here we are once again in the kitchen, and we're gonna go ahead and see how well he sticks. Very good. It actually sticks a lot better than the Ben Reilly Mafex did, so good job. And that's going to be a wrap on this version of the Spider-Man figure. I'd say it's pretty great for what it is so far, though it's not all the way up to par in the paint department for most Mafexes, but ultimately I'm happy with it regardless if it's the bootleg or not. But that being said, let's move on to our contender, Spiderman Mafex number 75. You might notice right away that the webbing is not where it's supposed to be. In fact, the majority of the pieces have already fallen out of their dedicated mold indentations, leading to everything being kind of scattered everywhere. Moving on to the back, I do apologize for the damage done to the box. Obviously, whoever handled it did not care about the contents inside. This wasn't an issue with the company, I don't think, as the outside of the entire parcel was damaged. We do get more of the same from the last box, and the graphics look just as crisp and clear. It also looks like instead of getting just 2, we're getting an additional unmasked head sculpt. I'm definitely excited to see how that one plays out. First thing I noticed after removing the contents from the inside is that we got the exact same background cityscape that came with the first box, and they both seem to hold the same level of quality. Keep in mind, guys, that it isn't reliable to depend on the graphics to be incorrect or fuzzy anymore to tell if something's a bootleg or not, and this is proof of that right here. So I know earlier I said the contents on the inside had splattered all over the box, but I guess that was an understatement because only a couple of pieces stayed in their intended positioning. Whoever handled this parcel, man, they must have just had issues with me for ordering too many figures or something. Of course, we got the same exact stand, the only difference being that it's missing the straight stick piece, but that's okay because I never posed with that one anyway. No authenticity check though. Kind of weird. Now it's time to get our boy Pete out of the packaging, and something I missed off the bat was the fact that aside from just the unmasked head sculpt, we also got the mask for him to hold in his hand, so that helps to add a little bit of charm and character to this figure, and I really appreciate the inclusion of that. Now, remember how earlier I said that the previous Spider-Man pretty much fails the paint category? Well, I take that back. This thing is atrocious, like laughably bad. There's almost no paint inside the lines of the chest, and it suffers the same with the mask as well. Even in the paint around his eyes, it's just so spotty. But hey, they didn't forget the giant paint splotch on the side of his jaw, so I guess that one was intentional. One pro that I could grasp off of my first impression though was that this one had some silver glossy eyes, which to me was a nice little touch instead of the bland white that we got with the other one. I will say that the backside of the figure looks surprisingly fantastic. The airbrushed shading goes a little bit deeper here, and I honestly like it a little bit more than our first Spider-Man of the day. From here, I want to test out swapping the heads, and to be quite frank, it more so just fell off when I tried to grab it. I mean, this thing just won't pop on all the way. Like, it feels like the head sculpt is just not the right size for this peg. At least the first one does, because weirdly enough, the second one fits perfectly fine and gave me no issues. The second head sculpt's paint and sculpt job also mimics the exact same quality control as the first, which was pretty much to be expected. Now, we have one more head sculpt to inspect here. Don't laugh, but here it comes. What the hell? This is horrendous. I keep thinking to myself that with a little paint, it might be salvageable, but wow. It gets worse the longer I look at it. I really thought that the Yamaguchi Gwen's maskless sculpt was bad, but please, for the love of God, give me that one back instead. So it's probably pretty obvious now which one is the bootleg here. And honestly, I didn't know if I could hold off revealing it any longer, because in the next section of testing the articulation, the leg just fell off. From here, there really isn't anything good that I can say about the bootleg. The paint is super shoddy, the articulation points are rough, such as its double jointed areas. They're super stiff and get caught on the ridges much like my Figuarts Gwen did. And on top of all of this, it just f***ing reeks, man. This thing's smell just screams 20-cent paint job and cheap recycled nuclear waste. I honestly feel endangered holding this thing in my hand. Now, there are a couple things that I left out here that are worth mentioning as well, so don't take off just yet. Firstly, they did a fairly decent job at replicating the hands aside from the thwip pair, which were missing half the pinkies on both pieces for some reason. I thought that was kind of funny. Like, did Peter pledge to the high table or what? But the rest of them hold up pretty damn well, and I think could easily fool someone who doesn't know what they're buying. The magnetic set that we got also just doesn't work. Here we are in the kitchen, so let's go ahead and stick them and see what happens. Let's go ahead and stick them and see what happens. I don't think this one's gonna stick. at all. I even tried two-handing it with the camera sitting down, and I could not for the life of me get them to hold his weight. Oh, and also for the webbing, you guessed it, it's pretty bad too. Now for the conclusion. I feel like I don't have to say much. Should you buy bootlegs instead of the real deal? Well, I think that depends on whether you like having figures in your collection or not. I think it could potentially be a good gag or prank gift. I mean, this thing only costed me $20 total, although it did take an entire month to come in the mail. But yeah, I really don't know what else to say other than don't buy bootlegs. What do you guys think I should do with this thing? Comment down below. But anyway, yeah, the other Spider-Man was the real one. If you guessed that, congratulations. I think that's gonna do it for today. Let me know what you guys think about these bootleg style videos or what I should take a look at next. I want to thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. It sincerely means a lot to me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. As always, guys, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.